What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of What You Gonna Watch.
What you gonna watch?
It's been a while, about 390 days to be exact. A little over a year, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, we're back with a cult classic, actually is what I learned it was, Secretariat. I learned a cult classic was something that, when it first comes out, it fails to kind of like be a popular movie, right? But it does kind of tailor to a small, very loyal and deeply passionate group of fans who treat it as special. And, I would treat this as special. It's about Big Red. Everyone loves Big Red. And that's how you could tell it's a cult classic right there, because how many people know Big Red right off the top of their head? So I rated Secretariat a 25 out of 30 or a 4 out of 5 star. Basically, this movie was like almost perfect. Alrighty, so starting with the show description. Penny Chenery Tweedy and colleagues guide her long shot but precious stallion to 3 unbeatable Triple Crown speed records. Very simple description. Starting Season 2, Episode 16, off on a strong note, we're going to talk about the writing and story, which basically details the plot, the pacing, and the dialogue, which I gave it a 5 out of 5. Because for one, the most important thing is it's based off a true story, which already makes it just 10,000 times better, because we all know if it's based off a true story, it's probably for a reason, right? So Secretariat has probably one of the better hooks in movies I've seen for sure, I think. It starts off with this woman, this like voiceover of a woman talking about a man called Loeb who complains to God about all his problems. And it says God answered, and just the way like he answers, you know what I'm saying, you'll have to listen to that for yourself. It just makes you really makes you eager to get into the movie. And one of my favorite like lines from that towards the end is whenever she says, "He cannot stay still when the trumpet sounds." And it's like, obviously, he's talking about Big Red because we're showing images and pictures of Big Red, and it's just the way he talks about the horse. So the movie starts in Denver of 1969 with the family having what would be an average breakfast, some kids asking for pancakes and talking about buying another dress, which I guess her father thinks she has too many dresses, and the mother, Penny, she learns that her daughter is going to be in a Christmas pageant, which is like a war history kind of pageant, right as she gets a phone call, dun 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 dun, saying that her mother has passed away. And then just like that, the whole family's in the car, packed up, and gone to the farm. Here at the farm, a lot of problems rise, So they have the funeral, everything's, good and dandy. She goes in to see her father and stuff like that, and her father doesn't really want her to sell the farm, right? Her brother wants her to sell the farm, right? Basically, everyone's telling her to sell the farm, but she doesn't want to sell it. So what does she do? Doesn't sell it, obviously. So her brother insists on selling the farm because it's losing money rather than gaining money. Her brother also insists that their father go to a nursing home rather than stay there just because of the care and the maintenance and stuff. They're more equipped than they are. But Penny doesn't really quite agree with the idea. She says he already knows around the farm, so he should just stay there, because the doctor said that Penny's father would basically be in and out of being aware of where he's at and what he's doing. He claims that because he's a professor and because she's basically a housewife, they also don't really have the skills equipped to take care of the farm either. As I feel like any person should, I think she takes it as a little bit of an insult. Now, her husband had moved up their flight so that way they would get back the next day instead of, I think, 2 days later or whatever. But she said she needed a few more days because she needed to make sure her dad was all right, as well as going through her mother's things. She also, stated the kids could use some more responsibility. And just like that, her husband and her kids are on their way back home while she's still at the farm. The first official business she does on the farm, if you will say, is firing the farm hand, because she learns that he was a little bit sketchy in the deal that her father almost made, selling 4 of his best horses for half the price, which their mother stopped, thankfully. She learned that the farm helper was going to get a portion of the money in that, so she fired him on the spot, basically. He pulled the whole, "it's in the contract, I'll sue you," but we know he never did. Skipping ahead to a little bit more of the important parts, Where Secretariat comes into play is when she's trying to, figure out how she can save the farm. She comes across a deal that her father made with the richest guy in America. So she learns that the coin toss is on December 9th, which is basically going to have to cause her to stay at the farm for a little bit longer. So she calls her husband to explain that basically stallions cost more than mares, but her father knew that a good horse came from a good mare, so he invested in mares, which was the first smart thing that he did, she says, and the second smart thing he did was make the deal with Ogden Phipps, which was to breed Phipps's best stallion with their 2 best mares, and whenever they're close to term, they're going to have the coin flip to figure out who gets which foal. She already knows which foal she wants, as she says she's been through the stud books. She basically explains that Bold Ruler is the sire, the father, and he was fast, but he couldn't quite last over long distances. Hasty Matilda, who's 8, which is young, and when they're young, that's when they produce their best offspring, which makes her foal the obvious choice. Something Royal is 17, which is kind of old, but her grandsire was Prince Quillo, who had great stamina, which kind of obviously makes the obvious choice. Her husband insists that she comes home instead, saying, sire this, mare that, not really understanding what she's saying, but she insists that she comes home after the coin toss in 2 weeks. So in the beginning, we basically learn where Secretariat came from, how the bid and how the coin toss came about, and how he was selected and why he was selected, learning about his parents and his grandparents. So skipping ahead again, he's already won quite a few races. He's the horse of the year. But Penny and her farm, it's kind of suffering, right? So she has to sit down with Ogden again and ask him if he can invest in Big Red, which he gives her a flat right, says, yo, I could have had Big Red for free if I would have just chosen the horse, and I know you're in a bit of a struggle, so I'll just give you $7 million in cash for him right now. And she says, of course not. Why would I do that? If he does what I think he's going to do, he's going to double in value, no, triple in value. And I don't know how much he was worth then, but in today's money, he would be worth $100 to $200 million. And just the saddle alone that that the actual racer used is worth $1.5 million. Who has that kind of money? And when Penny insists that Big Red is definitely for sure going to win the Triple Crown, which is the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont, 3 races, three states across 5 weeks, which hasn't been done in 25 years, he decides to offer her $8 million for Big Red instead, which she graciously declines, as she should. So Penny has Big Red syndicated for a record-breaking $6.8 million. And now if you don't know what that means, I believe there are 32 investors, I think, and that basically gave those 32 investors the right to Secretariat's offspring. So they basically, after he retired in 1973, because of the contract, he had to retire by November or December 1st of 1973 to protect the assets, right? I think that's kind of crazy, I'm not going to lie. I think he would have done so much better racing, especially in the end when you learn a little secret about him. And so in the end, he ended up having quite a few children, I believe. And basically what would happen is the investors once a year were able to send their mares to the farm where they would breed with Secretariat. And when they were confirmed pregnant, they would be shipped back to said investor. Whenever that foal was born, they could do whatever they want. They could sell it, they could keep it, and so on. I saw some high numbers, I saw some low numbers, so I really don't know which it is, and I hope it's one of the lower numbers I saw. Jack, my boy, is not very happy when he finds out that his wife just said no to $8 million. But that doesn't even matter, because before you even know it, the Derby comes around, and who wins? Big Red. And actually, while we're on this topic, I saw one of Big Red's races through a YouTube video, and it was actually kind of cool because the way they do it in the movie, he starts off in last place and ends in first place, and the race I saw, he started in last place and ended in first place by a length or two, and it was just kind of cool. Big Red definitely for sure did not win all of the races he was in, but he definitely won the majority of them, obviously including the Triple Crown. So after Big Red wins both the Derby and the Preakness in record time, Lucian starts to get a little bit worried because the Belmont is next, which is kind of the biggest race of them all. It's the longest, the toughest, and the last race that they need to win the Triple Crown. In the past about 22-ish years, there have been about 7 horses who have made the Derby and the Preakness, but failed the Belmont. So, he's kind of getting a little bit worried. This is also when a crucial decision is being made. Because of the Belmont being the longest race the horses will run, usually the owners will let their horse rest over this time or not work him as hard. But Lucian, he says in all of his years of training, he's never met a horse who likes to run as much as Red does. So he suggests that they work him hard. So, over the course of the time getting prepared, instead of letting him rest, he gets worked extra hard. And they basically just have to hope that their decision was right, because it could all go wrong and he could be too tired and not want to run on the actual day. Which the other struggles that they kind of run into is if it goes wrong, everyone's going to think that they either ruined his chances to getting to the Triple Crown or they just ruined the horse in total. They also don't know quite how far Big Red can be pushed, so they're kind of a little skeptical, but Penny believes that she thinks that Big Red knows how far he can push himself. And in June of 1973, there's a press conference that's being held, which basically is comparing the top two horses, which is Big Red and Sham. Which Sham, he deserves a little bit of credit here. He may not have been like the top horse or like won the races, but he came in second both times in the Derby and in the Preakness, still breaking records, coming in second place, by the way. He's the only horse that has ever came close to like being as good as Big Red ever was. So the press conference starts off with Mr. Martin talking about how Secretariat is built for speed and how Sham is built for distance, and any good horseman is going to know that, right? And so Lucian, the horse trainer, doesn't really quite like that. He goes to say something, but Penny holds him back. And then Mr. Martin goes on to say that this race is going to prove, if anything, that a woman's intuition can only take her so far. So I don't think anyone really paid attention to that comment, because then the news journalists were asking how Penny was dealing with how Big Red's attention covered both the Times and the Newsweek. And right as she was about to respond, somebody didn't like that. So they kind of got up and made a whole speech that, I'm going to let you guys listen to.
Let me tell you something about all this talk about Superhorse. Sham broke the Derby record too. He ran the second fastest Derby. He ran the second fastest Preakness ever. We were right there with the red horse every step of the way. And now we're getting ready to run the longest of the Triple Crown races. When we're done, you'll be calling Sham the Super Horse.
So as you can hear, he was pretty upset, and you can imagine him standing while giving that speech, right? So he sits down and lets Penny answer. Penny says a sentence, and he kind of gets upset and he leaves. And I'm going to let you hear the sentence from her because of the way she says it.
Well, I'd have to say I agree completely with Mr. Martin. His horse did run the second fastest ever.
So as you can hear from that right there, that was the only sentence she said, and the crowd found it hilarious. He did not find it hilarious. He stormed out of there, and he called her arrogant to like his friend or something. So fast forward a little bit, they're training Red, and they actually get some looks and stuff like that because everybody knows that they're training Red harder than what they usually would or what they think they should. So they definitely get some looks for that. And then later, everyone is at a Belmont ball where they're celebrating, the race coming up. And just listen to how praised Red was, right? This is from his trainer, Lucian. Obviously, I'm not sure if this was based on real event. Like, I'm not sure if this is exactly what he said, how close to it was, but it's kind of close to how praised and how important he was then.
Turcon, Edward say he's the smartest horse they've ever seen. Maybe. I've trained horses my whole life. I still don't have the slightest idea what they know and what they don't know. 3 years ago, I would have said that a racehorse didn't care who his owner was, but then he's not a racehorse. He's Secretariat. And I think tomorrow, he'll be wearing wings.
And just like that, the ball happens, everything goes great, the music's great, the events go smooth. Ron, the trainer, he gets a much taller girlfriend than he is by saying he's taller when he stands on his wallet. And Penny also ended up getting the coin that was used in the coin toss. And at the end, you can also see that Lucian is able to let go of some things that he's been holding on to, like some of the losses that he just wasn't able to get over. And just like that, June 9th, 1973 has arrived, and he's ready for the race. So the only hiccups that they've had training him hard so far has been, there was like a splinter or something like that in his foot, which was a really nice moment because Penny was kind of able to talk to him and kind of figure it out, you know, from horse to human. So the day of the race, it was about like 90 degrees, so the horses' owners kind of really had to try their best to make sure that their horses stayed cool before the race started, making sure they stayed cool definitely during and after the race as well. So now it's time for the actual race. He's in first place at this point, we're coming near the end, and here's what Penny has to say. This is like the voiceover Penny, which I'm pretty sure was in the beginning, but I kind of found it hard to figure out if that was actually her or not, but here's Penny.
He laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. He does not shy away from the sword. He cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds.
So we end off with Secretariat winning by a grand total of 31 lengths, which still hasn't been beaten to this day. And something that the movie also kind of did was, there's a famous photograph where Ronnie's actually looking back and looking at the horses that were far away. They made sure to include that in the movie. They also made sure to include that during the races, Secretariat would be the one to normally not really stand still, and the announcers would kind of call that out. So in the movie, whenever Secretariat, you know, he would be the one moving around, and the announcer would call that out as well. And it's also kind of cool because you can actually go to YouTube right now and you could watch his races in real time. Not real time, but you could watch his races. So I gave that a whole 5 out of 5 because I thought, you know, the plot was really good. The way it went through all the details, you know, it wasn't too fast, it wasn't too slow, and there was obviously plenty of dialogue, which is really good. The actors were amazing. Moving on to performance, which I just hinted at, the actors were amazing, obviously, including the horse. I actually didn't look into how they trained the horse, you know, for that specific movie. Another thing is, whenever I was watching the YouTube videos on the races, I did see is the crowd, they definitely did not under or overestimate that. The crowd was definitely going wild for sure, and they included some of like the close-ups that were in the race footage that I saw too, which I thought was kind of funny, just the little details that they added. Yeah, I gave the performance a 5 out of 5 because the acting, especially again from the horse, I'm not quite sure how they did that, was great. The voice acting, as in like the beginning and the end when it was doing the voiceover talking about Big Red, those were just really like hooking moments. It was just, you kind of almost even realized the movie was ending, almost just the way it was. And obviously just the chemistry between everybody, you know, Penny and her husband, you know, even the kids, the family, it all just gave a really like a big family vibe. Like the farm was just one big family, and it was just really nice to see that like everyone was happy, you know, that in the end the farm ended up being able to be saved. As for the visuals and styles, this one was basically a 5 out of 5. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because the movie was in 2010, so if I were to rate this in 2026 based on these standards, it would be like a 4 out of 5. But if I were to watch this in 2010, I think it would be a 5 out of 5. Because like the cinematography, especially like the scenes that were like up close of Big Red running, especially like the ones of him growing up as like a fool and stuff like that, those were just like, first off, the color and stuff like that, it was just amazing. I don't know who color graded everything, but they definitely did an amazing job. Just the scenes, the way everything was just pictured out, it was just like the director Wallace, he did an amazing job. Another thing about this is the director wanted to film in Kentucky for a few different reasons. One being that's where some of the races were actually held, and as well as he just knew that he had to go back to Kentucky just for the people as well, which ended up being like a great idea. It ends up being a great idea because he ends up having like no struggle getting the amount of people he needs to fill in for those large scenes, especially during the races, which one of them had a record-breaking 13,000 people. So he had no troubles getting some extras. So again, as you know, this was placed in the early 1970s, which is, you know, when the actual races were held. And so some of the places were actually filmed in the actual place, such as the Kentucky Derby scenes were actually filmed at Churchill Downs, which is the real track that Secretariat ran at. And then for Belmont Stakes, they filmed at a different place called Keeneland Island instead of Belmont Park, because Keeneland Island's architecture looked more like the place did in the 1970s. It looked more like the place than Belmont did, so they thought it would be better to shoot there, and it was just easier for the production team to control more of the crowds and stuff that was going on around there, which I think fits because the old-timey vibe they were going for, I think back then, I think it worked, especially for the scenes where Penny is watching Big Red grow up, from a little baby. As I said earlier, it was very old-timey. I think it was giving off the vibe that, it was going to. And some things I mentioned earlier, just the visuals and just the style, just of everything, the way he went to go about this, when they were like training earlier and getting judged for training because of training him hard. There was just a clip where it was literally just Big Red running. I think this one definitely deserved a 5 out of 5, just especially because within the first minute of the movie, you're already hooked, as I mentioned with the little voiceover of Penny, and then everyone's just eating breakfast, everything's going well, they're talking about, the pageant and stuff like that. It does turn rather sad whenever, you get the news of her mother dying, but it's just the way that they're able to go from emotion to emotion. It's not, that was kind of sudden, but all of it's not, but it's in a good way. And then also at some point during this movie, I did kind of feel scared for the horses, because in the beginning you hear from Ronnie, like the rider, that he once pushed a horse so hard that its heart exploded. So I was definitely, thinking it was kind of going in that direction because she was going to hire him. But, obviously we learned that he wasn't. Especially whenever that time when he wasn't running like himself and stuff like that. I was like, oh no, it's definitely going to happen, because they were kind of confused. But that was whenever Penny was kind of able to talk to him and get on his level and figure out, what was kind of, wrong with him. So yeah, another thing is whenever Big Red was getting ready for the race and them deciding to push him instead of let him rest, that was, unless you've seen the movie, and you know what happens, or Big Red, it's kind of like, that doesn't seem like a very smart decision, but it ends up being, one of the smartest decisions they made. And this movie definitely makes you, want to tear up and cry during some parts, especially the beginning's a little sad, whenever, she does find out her mother dies, a little funeral, it gets a little sad, it gets a little happy, and then in the end, whenever Big Red wins, it's like, you know he's gonna win, but it still makes you like good job, Big Red, you know what I'm saying? So it definitely does, have a little bit of an emotional impact there. So moving on to entertainment value, I did give it a 4 out of 5, which that's basically just because this is a movie I would watch again. You do need a subscription though, unless use one of the illegal sites, because I did watch it through Disney Plus, which I have a subscription to. As I keep saying, the beginning of the movie, the opening, with the voiceover, it's just enough of a hook on its own, and you can't even describe it. It's like poetry or something like that. The movie is just, you're never really bored, or you never really want something to happen, because, you're just eager to find out what happens next. Also, get yourself some good popcorn, get yourself comfy, and this movie is easy to watch. This movie has a runtime of, it's 2 hours and 5 minutes, which I like to have a golden rule myself, which is usually when a movie is over 2 hours, usually it means because it's a good movie. 99% of the time it means it's a good movie, and this one definitely fits in the good movie category. All in all, I just think the emotional value that you are getting out of this show is definitely really good, and I would definitely recommend this show, especially people who don't know who Big Red is, or people who are just interested in history. I think this is definitely a really good movie to watch. Moving on to, last but not least, the cost versus popularity. And once again, for a movie that was based on a horse, right, just a horse from the 1970s, Secretariat actually did really well. So it cost about $35 million to make the movie, and it ended up earning about $60 million. Again, this is like a cult classic, as I learned earlier, unless you're interested in either racehorses or just old movies, it doesn't really fit in your niche. So it made its money back for sure. They made at least $25 million. But the most interesting thing kind of about this movie is, though, even though it wasn't, a massive hit or anything like that, in the beginning, it was enough of a hit, right, to stay steady in popularity. So even though it didn't make $1 million, it's still a decently popular movie to where it's not gonna be taken off of Disney Plus. Which that definitely isn't bad, considering this movie is about, it's a sports drama about a horse, and it's probably one of like the best ways you can learn about Secretariat. A lot of people out there don't really like reading, but, put it in a movie form and it's great. So even though it wasn't really, like a huge, hit off the beginning, it was definitely still successful. It's still respected, it still gets watched, today and stuff like that, recent days. And so it's just, it's pretty good for this movie. And I didn't mention it earlier, but those are the reasons why I did give the cost versus popularity a 3 out of 5. Alrighty, and basically just the last, few things to mention about this movie is that there's no second movie. Obviously, not that I need it. It's based off a true story, so everything about Secretariat that you need to know is in that movie. And people still watch and talk about it, and especially the Triple Crown season, because that record has still not been beaten to this day. The last thing to mention about this show is how Secretariat was honored after he died, because most racehorses, they're only buried with their head, their heart, and their hooves. Well, it's a tradition which symbolizes 3 different things. I can't remember. It's like strength and something like that. I'm not even too sure. But Secretariat, he was buried whole, which is, a rare privilege. He was buried with, everything there. And so the thing that I was talking about earlier, the special thing that made him able to do what he was able to do. So the vets discovered that his heart was like really big. It was about twice the size of a typical thoroughbred's heart, which is different from a purebred, which is like 100% pure. He wasn't 100% pure. He was a thoroughbred, right? And his heart was about twice the size, and it wasn't from disease. It was just naturally that big. And that's one of the discoveries that became like, the biggest thing of how his speed was just unreal. And it's a huge part of why he's, remembered with so much respect today, because he was able to, to do what he was able to do. So that's basically going to wrap it up for this episode. I love any movie that's based on horses. The facts were real, and the suspension is, it was also real. Some negative facts about this movie were just me and my brother had some kind of disagreement on things. So my brother was thinking that Penny was basically trying to prove something rather than just care about the horses and just the farm and stuff like that. So basically saying that women have the most to prove, or when they have to prove something, they go further than what they really have to do. So basically he's saying that Penny only kind of kept the farm alive and did what she did to prove that she could do it, rather than doing it because she cared about her father, she cared about her mother, she cared about the farm, she cared about Secretariat. My opinion is that she did all that stuff, because she chose to do it, because she cared about it. I don't think she would have done it just to prove that she could have done it, and I just think that she proves that through the story. But that's what he sees. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys, and for you guys to watch the movie and tell me what you guys think. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the next episode, Obsession. You guys should know that name by now. You don't? I thought we were having a nice date.